8 signs you should retire earlier than you think. I know what you're probably thinking. Retirement is something you plan for years down the road, right? Maybe you've got a magic number in mind, like 65, or you're waiting until your savings hit a certain amount. But here's the thing. Sometimes, life gives you subtle, or not so subtle, hints that it's time to step away from the daily grind sooner than you expected. This isn't about giving up on your career or dreams, it's about recognizing when it's time to prioritize you, your health, your happiness, and the life you've worked so hard to build. So, if you've ever wondered, am I ready to retire earlier than I planned? Or, what are the signs I should even be looking for? This video is for you. We're going to break down 8 clear, practical signs that might be telling you it's time to retire earlier than you think. I'll share real-life stories, expert insights, and actionable steps you can take to figure out if early retirement is right for you. Plus, I've got a little surprise at the end, a free resource to help you plan your next steps. So, stick with me until the end, and let's get started. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Let's dive in. Let's start with the first sign, and honestly, this one's the most important. Your health is sending you warning signals. I'm not just talking about the occasional cold or a sore back after a long day. I'm talking about those persistent, nagging signs that your body is struggling to keep up with the demands of your work and lifestyle. Think about it, your health is your greatest asset, especially as you get older. If your job is taking a serious toll on your physical or mental well-being, it might be time to step back and ask yourself, is this worth it? Because here's the hard truth. No amount of money in your retirement savings can buy back your health once it's gone. Let me tell you about Susan. Susan was 58, a high-powered marketing executive who'd been climbing the corporate ladder for decades. She loved her job, or at least, she used to. But over the past few years, she started noticing some changes. She was constantly exhausted, even after a full night's sleep. Her blood pressure was creeping up, despite being on medication. And she started having these tension headaches that just wouldn't go away. Her doctor warned her that her stress levels were putting her at risk for a heart attack, but Susan kept pushing through. I'll retire at 65, she told herself. I just need to make it a few more years. But then, one day, she had a scare, a serious one. She was in the middle of a big presentation when she felt a sharp pain in her chest. She was rushed to the hospital, and while it wasn't a heart attack, it was a wake-up call. Her doctor sat her down and said, Susan, if you don't slow down, you might not make it to 65. That was the moment Susan realized she couldn't keep going at this pace. She retired at 59, a full 6 years earlier than she'd planned, and you know what? She told me it was the best decision she ever made. She started focusing on her health, walking every morning, eating better, and even taking up yoga. Her blood pressure stabilized, her headaches disappeared, and she finally felt like herself again. I'm not saying you need to have a health scare to retire early, but you do need to listen to your body. Here are some warning signs to watch for. Chronic fatigue that doesn't go away, even with rest, frequent illnesses, like catching every cold that goes around because your immune system is shot, physical pain, like back pain, joint issues, or headaches that are tied to your work environment, and mental health struggles, like anxiety, depression, or burnout that's affecting your daily life. If any of these sound familiar, it's time to take a hard look at your situation. Ask yourself, is my job worth my health? Because retirement isn't just about money, it's about having the time and energy to enjoy the life you've worked so hard for. And if your health is suffering, you might not have as much time as you think. Here's an action step. If you're noticing these health warning signs, don't ignore them. Schedule a checkup with your doctor and be honest about what you're experiencing. Then, start exploring ways to reduce stress in your life, whether that's cutting back on hours, taking a leave of absence, or seriously considering early retirement. Your health comes first, always. Let's move on to sign number 2. You're financially ready to retire, even if you don't realize it. I know what you're thinking. I can't retire early because I don't have enough saved. And I get it. Finances are one of the biggest reasons people delay retirement. But here's the thing, you might be closer to financial freedom than you think, and fear might be holding you back from seeing it. Let's break this down. A lot of people have a specific number in mind for retirement, like, I need $1 million in my 401k before I can retire. But that number is often based on assumptions, not reality. The truth is, your retirement needs depend on your lifestyle, your expenses, and the resources you already have. And sometimes, when you actually crunch the numbers, you realize you're in a much better position than you thought. Take Mark, for example. Mark was 62, a schoolteacher who'd been working for 35 years. He always planned to retire at 67, when he'd be eligible for full Social Security benefits. But over the years, he'd been diligently saving in his 403(b), and he and his wife had paid off their mortgage a few years earlier. Still, Mark was nervous. He didn't think he had enough to retire early. But then, a friend convinced him to sit down with a financial planner. They looked at his savings, his pension, his expected Social Security benefits, and his monthly expenses. After running the numbers, the planner told Mark, "You could retire today and be just fine." Mark was shocked. He'd been so focused on hitting an arbitrary savings goal that he hadn't realized he was already financially secure. So, Mark retired at 62, 5 years earlier than he'd planned. And you know what? He and his wife are thriving. They downsized to a smaller home, started traveling more, and even took up gardening together. Mark told me, "I wish I'd done this sooner. I had no idea how much freedom I was missing out on." I'm not saying you should retire without a plan, far from it. But I am saying that you might be closer to retirement than you think. Here are some signs you're financially ready to retire earlier than planned. Your debt is minimal or paid off. If you've paid off your mortgage, car loans, or credit card debt, your monthly expenses are likely much lower than you think. You've got a solid nest egg. If you've been saving consistently in a 401k, IRA, or other accounts, you might have more than enough to cover your needs, especially if you're willing to adjust your lifestyle. You've got multiple income streams. Maybe you've got a pension, rental income, or investments that can provide steady cash flow in retirement, and your expenses are manageable. If you've already downsized your lifestyle or you're comfortable living frugally, you might not need as much as you think to retire. Here's a quick way to check if you're financially ready. Calculate your annual expenses, everything from housing to groceries to travel. Then, multiply that number by 25. That's roughly how much you'd need in savings to retire. Assuming a 4% withdrawal rate, which is a common rule of thumb in financial planning. For example, if you need $40,000 a year to live, you'd need about $1 million in savings. But if you only need $30,000 a year, say, because your house is paid off and you've got a pension, you'd only need $750,000. Add in Social Security, and that number drops even more. Here's an action step. If you're curious about your financial readiness, sit down and do the math. Better yet, meet with a financial planner who can help you run the numbers and create a retirement plan that works for you. You might be surprised to find out you're closer to freedom than you thought. Let's talk about sign number 3. You're dreading going to work every single day. I'm not talking about the occasional bad day. We all have those. I'm talking about that deep, soul-crushing feeling where you wake up every morning and think, "I can't do this anymore." If the thought of going to work fills you with dread, anxiety, or even resentment, it might be a sign that it's time to retire earlier than you planned. Work is a huge part of our lives. It's where we spend most of our waking hours. And if you're miserable at your job, that misery spills over into every other part of your life. It affects your mood, your relationships, your health, everything. And here's the thing. Life is too short to spend your days doing something that makes you unhappy. Let me tell you about Linda. Linda was 60, a nurse who'd been working in a busy hospital for over 30 years. She used to love her job. She felt like she was making a difference in people's lives. But over the years, things changed. The hospital became understaffed, the hours got longer, and the emotional toll of caring for patients started to weigh on her. Every morning, she'd wake up with a pit in her stomach, dreading the day ahead. She'd come home exhausted, snap at her husband over little things, and spend her weekends just trying to recover enough to do it all over again. She kept telling herself, "I'll retire at 65, just 5 more years." But deep down, she knew she couldn't keep going like this. One day, Linda had a heart-to-heart with her best friend, who asked her a simple question: "If you could retire tomorrow, would you?" Linda didn't even hesitate. She said, "Yes," in a heartbeat. That conversation was a turning point. Linda started looking at her finances, talking to her husband, and making a plan. She retired at 61, 4 years earlier than she'd planned. And you know what? She told me she felt like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She started volunteering at a local clinic a few hours a week, still helping people, but on her terms. She had time to garden, spend with her grandkids, and just breathe. She said, "I didn't realize how much I was missing until I stepped away." So, let's do a quick check-in. Ask yourself these questions. Do you feel a sense of dread or anxiety every time you think about work? Are you counting down the hours until the workday ends, every single day? Do you find yourself daydreaming about quitting, even if you don't have a solid plan? Has your job stopped bringing you any sense of joy or fulfillment? If you answered yes to any of these, it might be time to seriously consider early retirement. I know what you might be thinking, but I need the income. And that's a valid concern. But there are ways to make early retirement work, even if you're not 100% financially set. You could transition to part-time work, start a small side hustle, or even consult in your field on a freelance basis. The goal isn't to stop working entirely, it's to stop doing work that's making you miserable. Here's an action step. If you're dreading work every day, take a step back and evaluate your options. Write down what you'd do if you weren't working. Maybe it's traveling, spending time with family, or pursuing a hobby. Then, start exploring ways to make that a reality, whether it's retiring fully or transitioning to something less stressful. You deserve to wake up excited about your day, not dreading it. Moving on to sign number 4, you've lost your passion for your career. This is a little different from dreading work. This is about that spark, that fire you used to feel for what you do, being completely gone. Maybe you used to love your job, maybe it was your dream career, but now, it feels like you're just going through the motions. If you've lost your passion for your work, it might be a sign that it's time to retire earlier than you think. Let's be real, passion is what keeps us going. It's what makes the long hours, the tough days, and the challenges worth it. But when that passion fades, work can start to feel like a chore. And if you're just clocking in and out, doing the bare minimum to get by, you might be missing out on the things that do light you up. Take John, for example. John was 63, a graphic designer who'd been in the industry for 40 years. When he started his career, he was obsessed with design. He'd stay up late sketching ideas, always pushing himself to create something new and beautiful. But over the years, the industry changed. Everything went digital, clients got more demanding, and John found himself doing the same repetitive tasks over and over. He didn't feel creative anymore, he felt like a cog in a machine. He kept working because he thought he had to, but he was miserable. He'd lost the passion that had driven him for decades. One day, John was talking to his son, who said, "Dad, you used to light up when you talked about design. I haven't seen that in years." That hit John hard. He realized he was staying in a career that no longer brought him joy, just because he felt like he should. So, he made a bold move. He retired at 64, a few years earlier than he'd planned. And instead of designing for clients, he started creating art for himself. He opened an Etsy shop to sell his prints, started teaching art classes at a local community center, and rediscovered his love for creativity. He told me, "I didn't realize how much I'd been missing until I let go of what was holding me back." So, let's check in with yourself. Ask these questions. Do you still feel excited or fulfilled by your work? Are you just going through the motions, with no real sense of purpose? Have you stopped learning, growing, or feeling challenged in your role? Do you find yourself more excited about your hobbies or personal projects than your job? If you've lost your passion for your career, it might be time to step away. And here's the beautiful thing about early retirement, it doesn't mean you have to stop working altogether. It means you get to choose work that does light you up, whether that's a part-time gig, a passion project, or volunteering for a cause you care about. Here's an action step. If you've lost your passion for your career, take some time to reflect on what excites you. Make a list of the things you'd love to spend your days doing. Maybe it's painting, gardening, or mentoring others in your field. Then, start exploring how you can make that a reality in retirement. You don't have to stay in a job that no longer brings you joy, life's too short for that. Let's talk about sign number 5, your work-life balance is non-existent. If your job is taking over your life, leaving you with no time for family, friends, hobbies, or even just relaxing, it might be a sign that it's time to retire earlier than you think. Work-life balance is so important, especially as we get older. You've spent decades working hard, building a career, providing for your family, but at some point, You have to ask yourself, when do I get to live? If your job is consuming all your time and energy, you might be missing out on the things that matter most. Let me tell you about Karen. Karen was 59, a project manager at a tech company. Her job was demanding, long hours, constant deadlines, and endless Zoom meetings. She was working 60 hours a week, often late into the evening, and even on weekends. She barely had time to see her husband, let alone her grown kids or grandkids. She missed birthdays, family dinners, and even her own hobbies. She used to love painting, but she hadn't touched a brush in years. Karen kept telling herself, "I'll slow down when I retire at 65. But then, her daughter said something that stopped her in her tracks. "Mom, I feel like I never see you anymore. The kids are growing up, and you're missing it." That was a wake-up call for Karen. She realized she was sacrificing the most precious parts of her life for a job that wasn't even making her happy anymore. So, she started looking at her options. She met with a financial advisor, crunched the numbers, and realized she could retire at 60 if she made a few adjustments, like downsizing her home and cutting back on unnecessary expenses. She retired a full 5 years earlier than planned, and now she's the grandma who's always at her grandkids' soccer games, painting with them on weekends, and finally taking those art classes she'd always dreamed of. She told me, "I didn't realize how much I was missing until I got my life back." So, let's do a quick reality check. Ask yourself, are you working so much that you have no time for family, friends, or hobbies? Do you feel guilty for taking time off, even for important events? Are you constantly bringing work home, mentally or physically? Do you feel like you're missing out on the things that make life meaningful? If your work-life balance is non-existent, it's time to rethink your priorities. Early retirement doesn't mean you have to stop working entirely. It means you get to reclaim your time and spend it on the things that matter most to you. Here's an action step. If your work-life balance is out of whack, start by setting boundaries at work, say no to extra projects, take your vacation days, and prioritize your personal time. Then, start exploring what early retirement could look like for you. Maybe you can transition to part-time work or a less demanding role while you plan your exit. Your time is precious, don't let work steal it from you. Moving on to sign number 6, you've achieved your major life goals. This one's a little more positive, but it's just as important. If you've already accomplished the big things you set out to do in your career or personal life, it might be a sign that it's time to retire earlier than you think and start a new chapter. Think about it. Why did you start working in the first place? Maybe you wanted to provide for your family, buy a house, pay off debt, or reach a certain level in your career. If you've already checked those boxes, why keep pushing yourself to work longer than you need to? Sometimes, we get so caught up in the daily grind that we forget to stop and celebrate our wins, and give ourselves permission to move on to the next phase of life. Let me tell you about David. David was 61, a small business owner who'd spent 30 years building his company from the ground up. His goal was always to grow the business, sell it for a good price, and retire comfortably. Well, at 60, he did just that. He sold his company for a nice profit, paid off all his debt, and had a solid nest egg for retirement. But instead of retiring, David kept working. He took on consulting gigs, started mentoring other entrepreneurs, and even considered launching a new business. He told himself, "I'm not ready to retire, I've got more to do." But deep down, he was exhausted. He'd already achieved his big goal, he just didn't know how to let go. It wasn't until his wife sat him down and said, "David, you did it. You built the business, you sold it, you set us up for the future, why are you still working so hard?" That conversation made David realize he'd already accomplished what he set out to do. So, he retired at 61, earlier than he'd planned, and started focusing on the things he'd always wanted to do, like traveling with his wife, learning to play golf, and volunteering at his local animal shelter. He told me, "I didn't realize how much I'd been holding myself back by staying in the game longer than I needed to." So, let's check in with yourself. Ask these questions. Have you achieved the major goals you set for your career or personal life? Are you still working just because you feel like you should, not because you want to? Do you have new dreams or goals you'd like to pursue, but work is holding you back? Are you staying in your job out of habit, rather than purpose? If you've already achieved your major life goals, it might be time to give yourself permission to retire early and start the next chapter. You've earned it. Don't let habit or fear keep you from enjoying the fruits of your labor. Here's an action step. If you've achieved your big goals, take some time to celebrate your accomplishments. Then, start dreaming about what's next. Maybe it's traveling, spending time with family, or pursuing a passion project. Early retirement can be the perfect opportunity to start that new chapter, so don't be afraid to take the leap. Let's talk about sign number 7. Your job is no longer a good fit for your lifestyle. As we get older, our priorities change. The job that was perfect for you in your 30s or 40s might not suit the person you are now. If your job no longer aligns with your current lifestyle, values, or needs, it might be a sign that it's time to retire earlier than you think. Think about it. When you were younger, you might have been okay with long commutes, late nights, or high-pressure environments. But as you age, you might crave more flexibility, more time at home, or a slower pace. If your job isn't meeting you where you are now, it might be time to step away. Let me tell you about Maria. Maria was 58, a corporate lawyer who'd spent her career working 50 to 60 hours a week. She thrived on the fast pace, the high stakes, and the adrenaline of the courtroom. But as she got older, her priorities started to shift. She wanted to spend more time with her aging parents, who needed her support. She wanted to travel with her husband while they were still healthy enough to enjoy it. And she wanted to finally have time to relax, something she hadn't done in decades. But her job wasn't flexible. She was still expected to work long hours, take on big cases, and be available at a moment's notice. It just didn't fit her life anymore. Maria kept pushing through, telling herself, "I'll retire at 65, just 7 more years." But then, her father had a health scare, and Maria realized she couldn't keep putting her family on the back burner. She retired at 59, 6 years earlier than planned, and started a small consulting business from home. She set her own hours, worked on her own terms, and finally had the flexibility to be there for her parents and enjoy her life. She told me, "I didn't realize how much my job was holding me back until I let it go." So, let's check in with yourself. Ask these questions. Does your job's schedule or demands conflict with your current priorities? Are you craving more flexibility, but your job won't allow it? Do you feel like your work is keeping you from living the life you want right now? Has your lifestyle changed, but your job hasn't? If your job no longer fits your lifestyle, it might be time to consider early retirement. And you don't have to stop working entirely. You can find part-time work, freelance opportunities, or even a new career that better aligns with your current needs and values. Here's an action step. If your job doesn't fit your lifestyle anymore, start exploring alternatives. Look into part-time or remote work options that give you more flexibility. Or, start planning for early retirement by figuring out how you can adjust your finances to make it work. You deserve a job, or a retirement, that fits the life you want to live now. Finally, let's talk about sign number 8. You're ready for a new adventure. This one's my favorite because it's all about possibility. If you're feeling a pull to try something new, to travel, to learn, to explore, to chase a dream you've been putting off, it might be a sign that it's time to retire earlier than you think and start that next chapter of your life. Retirement isn't the end, it's a beginning. It's a chance to do all the things you've always wanted to do but never had the time for. And if you're feeling that itch for adventure, don't ignore it. Life is too short to keep putting your dreams on hold. Let me tell you about Tom. Tom was 62, an accountant who'd spent his entire career working in a cubicle. He was good at his job, but he'd always had a secret dream, to travel the world and write a book about his experiences. He'd been putting it off for years, telling himself, "I'll do it when I retire at 67. But then, one day, he was sitting in a meeting, staring out the window, and he thought, "What am I waiting for?" He realized he was ready for a new adventure now, not 5 years from now. So, Tom started planning. He met with a financial advisor, figured out his budget, and realized he could retire at 63 if he made a few adjustments, like selling his car and moving to a smaller apartment. He retired a full 4 years earlier than planned, bought a one-way ticket to Europe, and started traveling. He's been to 15 countries so far, and he's halfway through writing his book. He told me, "I've never felt more alive. I wish I'd done this sooner." So, let's check in with yourself. Ask these questions. Are you feeling a pull to try something new, like traveling, learning a skill, or starting a passion project? Do you find yourself daydreaming about a different kind of life? Are you more excited about your retirement dreams than your current job? Do you feel like you're just waiting for, someday, to start living the life you want? If you're ready for a new adventure, early retirement might be the perfect way to make that happen. Don't keep putting your dreams on hold, life is too short for that. Here's an action step. If you're ready for a new adventure, start planning your next chapter. Make a list of the things you've always wanted to do, whether it's traveling, writing a book, or learning to play an instrument. Then, start exploring how you can make early retirement work for you. You've spent decades working hard, now it's time to live the life you've always dreamed of.